ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between. It is DebateSensei, limited preparation edition, where we talk about things relevant to competitive college-level debate in limited preparation debate events.
Limited prep.
Limited prep. LP. There we go. All right. I have with me from San Diego State, Tim CV. Sim TV. I am Jared Kabika Miller. I am a professor of communications, debate coach, and we are going to be talking about IPDA topic selection. It is I love these ones. I like the rhythm of them, and we get to talk about multiple topics, which is kind of the whole point of the IPDA. All right, so
love going through a whole bunch rapid fire style, because whether you love it or you hate it, you're only talking about it for a second.
Yeah. So we're pulling from the gold medal round of Fire Pi. This is the community college national tournament. And it was nearly as big as the 4-year national tournament. So a lot of the people that win at Fire Pi go on to win things like NPDA or NPTE, just like we had this year. All right. So excellent. All right. So,
gold topics. We gotta flip a coin to determine though.
Yeah. I got to pull up the share screen here because I have the coin flip ready to go. Here we go. I love this. This one's the U.S. Mint calls this a game, the coin flip game. So it's more fun that way.
Okay.
All right. And I believe what we always do, Tim, I'm flipping, therefore F is heads for you and neg is tails.
Sounds good.
All right, here we go.
Oh my god, this is the best game ever.
Achievement unlocked. Baby steps.
Okay.
One flip.
Achievements? Wow. Man,
Yeah.
if you really want to kill an afternoon, head on over to the U.S. Mint, everybody. Hoo-wee. You're in for a pile of fun.
Oh man, that was more entertaining. And look at us. We are entertained by it. All right, here we go. That was ridiculous. Okay.
So I'm on neg.
You're neg. You strike first.
I strike first. Democracy.
Democracy. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, you're gonna.
Yeah, I just don't like how mushy this topic is. I feel like neither side is going to have particularly clear ground. I get the intent of where the topic is trying to go, but I feel like in IPDA, since you don't really have topicality as a tool in your tool belt, you end up kind of having to force definitions, and debating them becomes a little bit looser. And I don't like how ill-defined the value might be. So what does support for democracy mean? How do you weigh political allegiance? So getting out of just the word debate of it, it's an interesting notion, right? I like that you can start having all of the polarization is the problem arguments. I think when people say oh, well, this side or this side is the problem, it's a more fun notion to say no, it is the bipartisan false dichotomy that is the problem, forcing one side or another. You're with us or you're with the terrorists kind of idea that is, more of the problem, and an unwillingness to compromise, and the tribal nature that is the problem with democracy. So you can make a couple arguments. It just feels a little bit more like a backyard argument than a debate round that you can really pin some impacts to one side or another.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know. I might take a case example of it. Maybe the I don't know.
Ukraine aid is relevant, right? So it just finally passed through the Ukrainian aid bill, and you can say that was delayed. That one you could probably attach some actual figures to it. Here are how many lives lost in Ukraine, or here is just the serious cost of the war between Russia and Ukraine going on that could have been better, or the circumstances could have been different had this just passed through, but because of various super partisan brinkmanship, aid bills got delayed, or maybe go to Taiwan or something, so it's less even.
Yeah, because as soon as you said that, I'm I like it. I do. I mean, I might do something like that on the affirmative, but then I all of a sudden start thinking about it's well, then they get to start talking about how that is the same justification used for Israel aid.
Mhm.
And now you start getting, I'm like, and you're like, okay, listen, if we're talking like basic principles, like I'm starting to argue the negative a little bit here. Oh, I'm just,
Mhm.
you know what, as the affirmative, I'm always on the lookout for
Sure.
traps and areas that I don't want to wade into,
Yeah.
right? And if I want to talk about Ukraine, I don't want to wade into Israel because after my first, 5-minute speech, I only got 3 minutes to come back, and follow up. If you spent like 4 or 5 minutes on Israel and then 1 or 2 responding to Ukraine, I don't know how I'd handle that, right? It does kind of change the dynamics for how to choose. So like I like using case area analysis as my way of framing and parametricizing things. I'm like, hey, there's a really good example of this, and both sides are represented. We should just take those sides.
Yeah.
And so, like the sort of Democrat Republican dichotomy over Ukraine also kind of exists on Israel, but like reversed. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so,
And you can even also like take like foreign issues off the table, like try and pick something that has really solid bipartisan popular support. So like both sides of the aisle of U.S. citizens support something,
mhm.
but political brinkmanship at the federal level ends up stopping things, or
Yeah,
like agencies end up stopping progress. So just
yeah,
taking like really common sense bills that died because like, oh well, it didn't have border security as a part of it, or it
yeah,
like didn't change abortion things. So I think like you can talk about like non-germane writers in the
yeah,
Senate being the problem. Um,
yeah.
I just feel like it gets a little bit sticky.
Okay. So we shouldn't spend too long on one that we don't want to talk about. Here we go. here's
Struck.
my here's my strike right here. I think it's an interesting area to look, but I think the overlooked word right there is the same sort of sense that I'm getting while you struck yours, where I'm like, man, I don't like I'm the AF, so I get to like it wouldn't be that bad if I got to define that, but I think
Mhm.
a short format debate like IPDA, you don't really get to really, unpack stuff like that over a long period of time, right?
Yeah.
So like, like topicality arguments, I mean, I think you need at least 4 speeches to kind of, start to hash it before you get into rebuttals. So
Yeah, I really do think that like topicality is probably going to fit its way into IPDA more and more. I feel like it's just inevitable because
yeah,
it is I mean, any procedural tool is a helpful one to dissect certain topics just because we're all kind of trained from the school of policy. Even if that wasn't
yeah,
it, like policy's just made its way through different circuits. But in any case, yeah, I think like is being overlooked. You can just argue like, here are the number of reported cases that or basically like here are the number of benefits that are offered compared to the number of cases brought forward, or here are I don't know, like the metrics of that would get a little bit tricky. I'm sure that those stats exist.
mm,
um, like maybe you can start talking about like boards of regions cutting benefits that are anything but like strictly medical, so like any mental health benefits being struck or something, and that therefore it's overlooked. But yeah, I think on the negative, try and really pin you to like, okay, what does it mean to be addressed? What does it therefore mean to be overlooked? What's the bright line of like how much change would need to be enacted in order for something to be like appropriately addressed versus overlooked? And I think that's probably harder for the affirmative to do.
yeah, like this one I'd probably turn into a policy. I'm like, all right, we got to stop overworking them. We're going to remove this requirement from their workload.
Mhm. Yeah.
like student learning outcomes, like I still don't know how they have improved or done anything that affected education. Like they're supposed to be like and we have to measure these things, we have to send in
Yeah.
these reports, and I'm like, well, where did the results go, and how do I learn from them, and how do I improve my teaching after I've submitted them? Like I see no back end. It's all, we're just supposed to have a conversation. I'm like, well, we're doing that anyway. I don't know
Yeah.
why. Are you saying that like the conversation is structured better around, like I think that's the best argument that they got, and even then I'm kind of like, you're overlooking mental health because that just creates stress. You know what I mean? It's like, and so
Yeah. I think I'd have to probably. It's a cool debate because it ends up being really relevant to the person in the back of the room. So
yeah,
like the
yeah,
judge is going to care a lot more about this particular topic. So this, as a competitor, sometimes you get a little strategic. Like it's not so much about what you want to debate about. think about what your judge would want to listen to.
Yeah.
That's, maybe one strategy when going through the IPDA strike process. And this might be a little bit higher on your list because it's more relevant to them.
But I didn't like.
Don't be on the neg.
What?
Just don't pick it on the neg in that case.
Yeah.
It's relevant to you, and also F you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if like all you have to do is say is like, hey, so where'd you get that evidence? It sounds like they had to look into this to collect that evidence. You know what I mean? Like, are you saying that there's more out there that's not being reported? How would you know? How do we determine that?
Logical fallacy starts to become apparent.
Yeah, but that is a good question. Just not a good one for IPDA. You know what I mean? It's like I don't think that's a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I would then strike. So this is the easiest one for me to strike on the neg, but I figured you want it, so I can wait a little while to strike it. Private prisons. I absolutely do not want to be on the negative side of this.
Oh, okay.
So U.S. federal government should abolish private prisons. I can come up with a number of like technical arguments of like this doesn't impact that many private prisons because many of them are not federal, or like the federal government can't do it, or like a Supreme Court backlash argument. Like I can have these various like technical arguments against and like procedural, like here's why it wouldn't happen. So it's a solvency press at best. But I don't think that I'm going to be able to engage on any of that rhetoric really. Like I think I have seen some students go for it and I was impressed, or they just didn't know yet. But like they were like, nah, private prisons have better funding, and that means that like prisoners receive a better like quality of life. I'm like, okay, you have a very, very tall hill to prove that. Like you got to hike up a lot to prove that point, and they did not flush it out a whole lot further. And I think the problem is not necessarily like that the prison is privately funded. It is the mechanism of incentive. So long as prisons make more money by having more prisoners, they are incentivized to keep prisoners there longer and for judges to give longer sentences. That like actual mechanism, now that there is a financial incentive for that to happen, that is where I contend some of the worst evils that our country sanctions come from. Like that's some of the absolute worst. I don't want to be on the negative side of that. I do not want to have to back that. And I know that I can get craftier, but I don't see like escape hatches in this topic that are comfortable enough for me to dive into.
Now, like it does make me, I think the research of looking into actual, like trying to find the best example of a private prison is one of my favorite strategies. In this case, perhaps on the affirmative, but there's a danger that maybe the negative could actually find an actual example. And then what you could do is it starts building counterplan ground out. Right. And so what the strategy is, this is known as the like the Iron Man or the Strong Man. Steel Man. Yeah, that's right. Right. The Steel Man. And so you find the best example, and now even if that example isn't good enough, then you're like, hey, we got to do something about this.
Yeah.
But I asked ChatGPT and they spit out a number of them. Then I'm like, okay, I could look into these. Like I want to know more about the GEL group. They're saying that they actually have some rehabilitation programs that are working. But yeah,
I think I can still end up sticking it on that financial incentive one. Like even if it is. So, okay, maybe the debate does come down to like quality of life of the prisoners, but I can say like the prison industrial complex of like supporting longer sentencing, like increased recidivism, like worse, I guess worse rehabilitation programs. Like even if yours are like, okay, we proved lower recidivism, can still say like so long as the company profits from having longer stays, like or longer sentences.
Yeah.
Then you're literally incentivizing incarceration. Like you're planning for and hoping for and aiming for incarceration. And like that is what creates the biggest problem. So like cite a bunch of new Jim Crow evidence.
Oh,
that like links in.
Oh man. I like, so I'm
saying like, no, it's good because it's they're,
No, I'm like, that's why I asked ChatGPT, because it's just going to answer me without thinking about it, right?
True.
You know what I mean? Like because that's how I kind of like learning about arguments. And like, all right, what would that argument sound like? and then find evidence that would support it. You know what I mean? It's like create the claim first, rather than the principle. And so I'm like, okay, if it were then if I did this counter plan where I kind of like picked out of like what like minimum security. I'm like, okay, we will ban all private prisons except minimum security prisons because those ones have proven to not be any worse than public prisons, right? And then I got to find the evidence for that. And so I start with the idea. I don't know if it's true. And then I go find if it's true, and be really ardent and critical and things like that about it. So, but the funny thing is I did that, and they were like, Emerald Correctional Management has minimum security detention centers. It's doing all right. I'm like, okay, now I go and I Google, and it's Emerald Corrections is out of business.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think you've got also, I think there's a little bit of non-inherency. So I think like one of his first acts as president, like Biden cut federal funding to private prisons. Now it's not the same thing as abolishing them, but I think you could probably start, I guess I would probably start arguing some like no solvency arguments on that front of like, okay, even with this amount of funding cut, they still existed because the federal government doesn't really have the teeth to do this. So maybe it's more of like an actor argument, like you don't have the right jurisdiction to shut down private prisons, and like any of these harms that you're setting up of like why private prisons are bad, you're not going to be able to solve with the federal government. So I think that's maybe like another area I would go. I just think there's a lot that I can do on the neg ground, but I still don't want to be on the just actual.
This one could get you into some trouble. But I just saw something about Emerald Correctional Management. I was looking at and they're like immigration detention center. Is it? I think. Selected for jail management. I don't know. I'd have to look into a little bit more.
Defining prison.
And then a weird thought crossed my head. If you only allowed private immigration detention centers, no other prisons are allowed, wouldn't that fight back against the incentive argument that you're making? That because
now they're just incentivized to like up ICE, right? So it's like private prisons will fund the hell out of their local police departments so that they just arrest, and they will also do all kinds of like bribey, awful things for judges to sentence. And now it would just be like, hey, ICE, you should crack down a whole lot more on like border control and fund all of those super PACs for
totally supercharges it. Yeah, it totally supercharges it.
Like, okay, we're gonna go in the night, like cut holes in the wall so that people make it through, so that they can be arrested and put in a detention facility. So it's like, all right, we're not about keeping people out, we're about arresting them as soon as they get here. I just think that would get really nasty. So the affirmative does have a lot of holes to plug, I'll say, from like inherency and from jurisdiction and capabilities, and even just like solvency, like what you can really do. But you're absolutely still on the right rhetorical side of it, and you've got to just tee off on like all of the stats around why economically incentivized prisons are absolutely evil.
Yeah, just from the ground. Like, okay, but if I have to answer that on the neg, I'd be saying it's like, that incentive still exists. Like there's plenty of like people calling for more prisons when there weren't private prisons. And so like, I think, on the neg, you should really, really fight back. And like, because like what you're doing is kind of, on one level, you could kind of critique the humanizing of the public prison system. If you go too far with it, right? It's like, it's like, oh, and now everything's fixed. It's like, no, they go to a different prison. Like, that's the ultimate outcome of your solution. It's like, we don't reduce the prison population. You say maybe effectively that you do. And I'll say, I don't know. It's like, I think that there's like ideologically based much more than sort of economically based stuff is
I suppose if you're talking about like prison overcrowding now, like the actual, like even if you are solving for this grander issue, like the practical outcome will be like tremendous overcrowding in public prisons. So I suppose you do have like a disadvantage there. That does get. This is a tricky one. I do enjoy watching this debate just because I think there's a lot to it and like a lot of direction that folks can take it. And I think you could also have a good criteria debate of like the criteria of this round isn't like federal dollars or quality of life, whatever. It is going to be recidivism. Like abolish that which has the best or which has the worst recidivism, or keep the thing that has better recidivism than status quo or something. Because I think like you have like a more clear bright line, and it's like an actual trackable numerical figure to shoot for, and it starts to undercut the arguments of incentive. It's like, well, if they have lower recidivism, then it sounds like they aren't actually incentivized. I don't know. I think that's an interesting debate. So I think that's one that would go a distance, but I don't know that I still don't necessarily want to be on the negative side of that.
Yeah.
I think because even if I did win, it's like sometimes you come away from those rounds, you just kind of feel dirty. Like I won like an oil drilling in Alaska debate one time, and I was like, yeah, I still don't like it. Like, it's a good opportunity to like evaluate your own beliefs and like really properly flush out whether things are good. But like, I just wanted some technical stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't want that to sound like, yeah, good, we should drill in Alaska. It's just the way that they did it wasn't right. And I can't, yeah. So that's a tough one. I think I just ideologically disagree with that one too hard.
All right.
Your turn to pick what we're doing.
All right, here's my last strike. Huh.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Not what I expected. Okay.
I know. Because like, I mean, the policy, it's a good policy topic, but the other one's just a good value topic.
I don't see a lot of affirmative teams nowadays going for value, like actively seeking out and wishing for a good value round. So
that one,
dating yourself, sir. Okay, so public colleges in the US should offer free daycare.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, like on the affirmative, would it be that bad? I think this would be a lot more about the changing demographics of students. Like, college students are kind of like enrollment is dropping, and they're starting to look towards re-gearing it for like work training and like sort of like get second job type of training, like trying to tap into that student base right there. And so a lot of those people might have kids, right? And so I could even like really, really highlight the uniqueness of like implementing this now, not necessarily pointing out that it's a long-standing problem, but it is a problem that is going to get worse. So it like really kind of like charges the inherency, I guess you would say, in this one, right? Where it really makes that. But the reason I mean, I think there's two good choices of topics, and so I don't know. On this one, alternate agent counterplans were kind of creeping around in my head. I was seeing ghosts with that one.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so I got three like pretty confident disads for you on this one.
Yeah.
The first being this just pushes parents into more student debt. Second, there are not enough yet valuable degrees offered at public colleges. So talk about like the actual matriculation from public colleges to the job market in like meaningful employment is not very good. So like you have more debt, you have less income generating opportunity prospects on the other side. And the final one being this takes even more money away from professors, faculty, the things that like universities do need to run. So for all of their evils, the people that bear the brunt of it tend to be like instructors that are not, tenured and been there for 40 years. So this makes like the adjuncts and things worse because now you're paying for daycare, facilitators because it's free, right? So like, fine, maybe you get some federal grants and stuff for it, but that's not going to go all that far. I would say like in general, that just stretches colleges more thin. Also, even like space, like the issues for it, I think just to create a daycare is an overcomable, it's a surmountable obstacle, but it will absolutely come at the expense of some other piece of the university. But I don't even love the university, so I'd make that my third disad, and if I didn't get to it, not a big deal. I would really just say like student debt's not worth it, and public college degrees are overvalued.
Okay.
Leave that there. Like,
yeah, I mean, I would
like another social, driveway into like, we will watch your kids for free so that you can go to school, and like more educated parents, rah. And I would say like that is feeding a false narrative. Like that's not true. Having another degree from a public college does not mean that you have like a better citizenry. It doesn't mean you have more meaningful employment. It doesn't mean that you have like a better financial outcome necessarily. Like I think those stats are getting more and more watered down every year.
Yeah. The stats are like the return on investment is still there. on average, you make more than you spend on a public education, and you make more than someone who doesn't spend on a public education. So, like, yeah, and like on the affirmative, there's I like plenty of room to go. Like, there's these things called child development centers that you just like your plan could just be make sure that they have it on there, because that's actually like teaching how to do the child development. So you actually have like students in child development.
I see. Okay.
And going there, but I like pushing back on it's like, oh, just putting more people into debt. It's like, well, those people were choosing it anyway. We're not saying that this is now like they wanted to do this, and we're just making it so they can. Not that it's not like it's like, okay, now you need to do this. It's like they lost their job and they need to go back to college and get something that's more marketable. So it's.
I feel like, I mean, yeah, cigarette companies don't make people smoke, but they sure do make the advertisements shiny and sexy. Like, this is just making the advertisement for college really shiny and sexy, and like, it's not forcing people, but I think it's supercharging that narrative.
You choose an evil, sort of like harmful product as your example. Like, the thing that we're selling isn't harmful; it is good for you. You know what I mean? So, like,
ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like I have a more aggressive bent against that. Okay, so I'm glad this is why I brought that up. So this would all be in service of trade school counterplan. Now it's going to be tricky because I don't know much like mutual exclusivity. I'm just very long on the idea of trade schools. I feel like that is such a better solution to like, hey, you want to advance your career, trade programs, like, and they're for whatever, like you want to go be like a paralegal, or you want to be like a, dental hygienist or a welder, or like any of the things that trade schools teach, you get out of that degree and you have an actual like very real career prospects and capabilities. Whereas like the traditional liberal arts degree, I think I just spend too much time with students graduating with comm degrees that are just getting kicked in the face for it. And like, that's a rough, prospect. Like, okay, well, go to grad school. And then I see a lot of grad students that are also really, really struggling with it. So I think just because of the bleakness of the job market, and I don't see it getting better, I see AI taking more and more of those jobs that like a traditional liberal arts degree would otherwise fill. I am less sold on the like return on investment of a public college degree that is not technical. So I would say like, here are technical options that are probably less expensive that could also offer daycare that I imagine many of them don't, but that like leads to the solving the harms that you're trying to solve.
Well, that leaves us.
Yeah.
There we go. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Like this one, I kind of like the squishiness on the affirmative.
Okay.
You know what it is? I just think that I just think the affirmative has presumption on this one.
It does. It for sure does.
And so, which is whenever you get a situation like that, you should take it.
That's a good piece of advice.
Yeah. So
it was the bottom of my list for the affirmative. I was like, I don't want to touch that one, but you make a good point. Yeah, like the room's going to be on your side by the time you open your mouth, so that's kind of a good spot you want to be in on the affirmative.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, I might boil it down to a specific case area, right? Have they gotten rid of the swimsuit competition for Miss America? Do you know?
I don't think so.
No. I mean, like that's kind of like on the. I don't think I would do that, but I would do something like that. I would, or might have that as one or two or three examples of that. I'm just like, all right, here's three examples of it. That doesn't really do
cosmetic surgery, like the number of like botched cosmetic surgeries and major, either like lifelong issues that come from it, constant upkeep, whatever. I think like cosmetic surgery is probably a good area to get to wail on.
I think that they're starting to collect a lot of data on the correlation between social media usage and mental health. That's
really good.
I think in 30 minutes, I think because I know I've come across a few of them, so I think in 30 minutes I'd be able to find that again. Through a little bit of research. I
think my job is to have to pin you to what are beauty. Again, this is why it's tricky on the negative in IPDA without the tool of topicality in your tool belt, but like pin you to what are beauty standards and how do you define harmful? I honestly, even like society, like I don't want to belabor the point of like, oh, you got to define terms, but really truly, like you can just say like, it's not enough to just say like, our social understanding of beauty standards are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Do we all agree on beauty standards? Why are they bad? Why specifically, like what specifically do they harm? Like what are the tangibles? Like I even probably agree with you. So you're right. Like the public.
Oh man, I got a good one.
Kind of on that side, but I don't have a hard tangible there yet.
So okay, here we go. I'd say you should never rate somebody on a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
That's my thesis.
Okay.
People should not rate each other on a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
And that's when you talk about beauty standards, that's a standard. 1 to 10 is a standard.
Okay.
Right? That's
like a classic 4. But...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, that would be my opening response. Okay. All right. That's a good like straightforward, because like there are these like heuristic terms or like topics that come up that everyone kind of collectively understands the definition, even if there isn't like a Black's Law dictionary definition or something like that. You can still pull from like, this is what the public views. Okay, so I don't have a ton on the negative side for that. So
I love
this
that.
is going to be unpopular, but I might go the idiocracy route of just saying like everybody believing that everything is good and like procreate because like, hey, like we all got to do it is worse and like sends evolution backwards. Now I tend to tell my students, whenever you find yourself going for the population control argument, you've gone too far. So I hear myself go in that avenue. It's not great. I don't love it, but it's the first thing that pops into my head. I probably would not go for that.
If I was on the neg, I would really challenge that. I would like, there's no such thing as beauty standards. That
would be the first kind of push is like, it changes over time. It morphs. There's not an agreed upon singular thing. Like you may be talking about like collective like body image, but body image is not beauty standards. Like body image are personal perhaps. And like beauty standards are amorphous and changing and non-defined or something like that.
Well, like, yeah, you should. Yeah, on the negative, be kind of like, let's stop using the term beauty standards. Yeah, like you and then you do alternatives like body image. It's a straight up critique. But I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Like you're bringing up the point of like rating in 1 to 10 is like, yes, that is a problem.
Yeah. And now I have to defend,
like tie back to
and I have to defend that you continue using the beauty standards as a term, right? I'm like, oh well, 1 to 10 isn't the only beauty standard, and we got to have something to like categorize these things, like, or it's a good thing to have, something to categorize, and that's not a slam dunk.
Yeah,
it's not a slam dunk argument.
Yeah. So I think this one is trickier linguistically for sure.
But I love
I don't have it in front of a room of people as much, I will say. Like I think there are more landmines to step on in that one.
But I do really like, honestly, I'm gonna I'm liking my interpretation of don't use the rating system. Like that'd be like, because it's like a policy, but it's not. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's like, okay, if we all start doing this, it actually could matter. You know what I mean? And we could, like decrease the harm to people.
Interesting avenue. Yeah. So cool topics from the gold round of Iro by.
Yeah. So that one turned out, oh man, that'd be awesome. All right. Hey, that does it for us. We are, it's like we are coming near the end of this whole debate season. So we got probably a few more episodes left before we take our summer break. So it's Tim, Jared, we're DebateSensei. We'll see you.
Thanks.